Mayor-elect African-American Brandon Johnson will replace her when he's sworn in May 15th. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Just getting reports of a stalled vehicle in Pacoima on the 5 southbound near the 118 interchange, middle lane blocked off there, so watch for sudden slowing. Crashing down to Lake, taking up 3 left lanes on the 10 eastbound of Mateo Street. You're hitting the brakes at San Pedro Street, and a crash in Montclair blocking 3 left lanes on the 10 westbound for Central Avenue. The westbound drive slows down back at 4th Street. In Fountain Valley, watch for some debris on the 405 northbound before Magnolia Street. Got a large box block on the right-hand lane. Looks like if you stay towards the left, it shouldn't be too much trouble.
If your company needs to spring into efficient hiring, then check out Indeed. Their powerful hiring platform makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers missed a great opportunity last night to take advantage of Ja Morant's absence. Morant's hand injury kept him on the sidelines, but his Memphis teammates responded. Memphis wins by 10 to even the best-of-7 series at 1-1. 6 Memphis players scored in double figures. Xavier Tillman had 22. The series comes to L.A. for the next 2 games. Game 3 is Saturday night. The Clippers are back in action tonight at home for Game 3 of their first-round series with Phoenix. The series is tied at 1-1. Kawhi Leonard has stepped up big time in Paul George's absence. Leonard is averaging 34 points in the first 2 games. Tip-off time tonight is 7:30. Tiger Woods might miss the rest of the 2023 season after having surgery on his right ankle Wednesday. The ankle has bothered Tiger since his car accident near LA in February of 2021. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Stand up and fight! When news breaks, you can count on KBLA Talk 1580 for exclusive interviews.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte. Incredibly delighted to welcome Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson. Brother, welcome to the show.
As Tennesseans, as Americans, as people of conscience, our responsibility is to get proximate to this movement. This is the moment. Folks always wonder, is this time for me to start using my voice for speaking up, for advocating for issues? This is it. This is it. The present moment where we are seeing the erosion of democracy, where we're seeing duly elected officials being expelled because we're raising the issue about the need to end gun violence and protect communities. And so for everyone who has ever had a thought that I need to do something, I need to be engaged, this is the moment to transform our cities, our counties, our states, and the United States of America.
Weekdays, weekends. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for the conversations that matter most to you. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Live from Leimert Park, USA, I'm Tavis, Smiley, and you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to see you and me back in stride again. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. All of our socials can be found at KBLA 1580. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, everything at KBLA 1580. Let me also invite you to download our app and listen to us live anywhere in the world, but only if you download the app right now at KBLA 1580. Should you miss us any day in real time, Check out the podcast of our program by going to the app, the website, Anchor, Spotify, Apple, so many places to get the podcast of this program and listen at your leisure should you miss us any day in real time. But I am delighted to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. You can also watch the live stream of this program by tapping on the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. And let me also invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, we all recall the moment when Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin went into full cardiac arrest on the field during a nationally televised game against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was a terrifying sight to behold as we all watched Hamlin receive CPR live on the field. He was later carted off and hospitalized, where he would spend multiple days in critical condition. Players were shook. The game was abruptly canceled. And now, cleared by doctors to return to football activity, Damar Hamlin has announced that he plans on making a comeback to the NFL. All right, would you go back? We will talk sports in hour 2 with our sports guy, Ray Richardson, and his co-host on our weekend sports show, Out of Bounds, Neil Scarborough. And there's a lot more sports news to cover beyond Damar Hamlin's comeback, including, of course, the NBA playoffs and that record-breaking contract for Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts, negotiated by his brilliant black female agent, Nicole Lynn. We'll talk sports today in hour 2 with Ray Richardson and Neil Scarborough. In our third hour, have you ever heard of Charles Ignatius Sancho? If not, you're not alone, but you should, and you will, come hour 3. We'll be joined by author Patterson Joseph, who will tell us all about the life and legacy of Charles Ignatius Sancho. But we commence today's program in dialogue with Alyssa Quart about why the so-called American dream has become increasingly out of reach for so many fellow citizens. Are there flaws? Are there delusions of the American dream? Has our obsession with self-reliance led to a society that is less healthy, less secure, and less fulfilled? What is at the heart of our collective suffering? Alyssa Quart's new book is titled Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream, and I am pleased to welcome her to this program. Alyssa, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm so happy to hear you again, Tavis.
That's kind of you say. Thank you for saying that. I'm happy to have you on, and I'm glad we got an hour. Your book is the polemic, I would call it, is a beautiful and fascinating read and an enlightening read, and I'm delighted to have this hour to sort of interrogate your text. Let me start with this. As you probably heard in my inflection, since you're so happy to hear my voice again, I laid on that word "from" in your title. Bootstrapped, liberating ourselves from the American dream. Unpack that word "from" for me.
Yeah, so what I found with my reporting is that the American dream in the last, let's say, 70, maybe 50 to 70 years has become a burden for people. It's something that doesn't work for them, that so many of us feel like we have to achieve on our own, succeed economically entirely on our own. Our health is our own, our raising our children is our own. And the original American dream, as was coined in 1931, didn't mean that. It was a more expansive and meritocratic idea of what that would mean. The original author used the word our American dream. And now it's become my American dream, right? It's us struggling on our own. And I love what you just said about that the athlete going back on the field, pushing himself. You know, I mean, this is part of what that is now. It's the grind set. It's 9 to 5. It's comebacks. It's people having to push themselves to the limit physically, you know, and have many side hustles, right? So that it really, I thought, oh yeah, this is part of the thesis of the book when you were bringing them up, you know.
What happened since you pegged this to 50 or 70 years ago when something changed or some things changed? What happened 50 to 70 years ago that sort of morphed the American dream into whatever it is these days?
Well, I mean, it definitely worsens with Reagan, right, with the idea of the welfare queen, who, by the way, was one woman, and he called her the woman in Chicago, and basically was a scam artist who was, draining the coffers of, welfare, but that was just one person, and he used it to slander everybody who got any, local or federal aid, And so that worldview of punishing people who need help really intensifies in that time, right? And, it's not just Republicans, it's also people like Bill Clinton who, wanted to end welfare as we know it. Mm-hmm. And just the lack of social support has intensified. We don't really have much of a social safety net anymore. Unionization has decreased. There's been a whole set of forces that have made it really hard for people to succeed on their own. The cost of education, the cost of health, et cetera. So some of this is about, unfettered, marketplace too.
Mm-hmm.
It's companies feeling like they can charge anything, and CEO pay outstripping worker pay by 399 times. More CEO is paid than the lowest paid worker.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask this question, and again, we got an hour, so we got some time to unpack this. In essence, what is it that you think we need vis-a-vis the American dream to liberate ourselves from exactly?
Well, I think we have to liberate ourselves from the idea that it's something that we have to accomplish solely on our own.
On our own, yeah.
And that there's something wrong with us if we can't. I mean, there's a lot of blame when I go out and report on this with people. Why wasn't I able to pay off my student loans? Mm-hmm. Why wasn't I able to own my house? Why am I not able to, have a better economic future for my kids than I had? And the message of this book is we have to liberate ourselves from that idea. It's kind of a fiction, and a lot of this is preordained to make it really hard for ordinary people to achieve those ends, right? So once we understand that, it's not like, everything's going to magically get better, but what I call this message radical self-help, because it frees you from the idea that it's the self that's to blame.
Mm-hmm. Just getting started, as I knew we would need the entire hour to unpack all that is in this text. It's called Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. And there is a lot to interrogate in this hour. This notion that she's just raised, Alyssa, that is, of the individual versus the collective, put another way, the our versus the my of the American dream. That notion of grind set, which is a different kind of mindset, pardon the rhyme. And this notion of a social safety net. And not to mention the unfettered markets that she talked about. There's a lot in this book. But clearly something has gone wrong with the so-called American dream, even as we continue to preach this notion of American exceptionalism, that we are better than everybody else, that God apparently is blessing us and smiling on us and cursing and frowning everybody else. I don't buy it. And yet that's the notion that we continue to advance in this country. Every president stands up once a year at the State of the Union address and tells us that the state of our union is strong. That's a lie. And there's a lot to interrogate about that lie in this hour. With the author of Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream, Alyssa Court, who you listen to right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
The clock is ticking, and there's just a few days left before God's Trying to Tell You Something comes to town.
We interrupt this program to bring you this special report. The 2 p.m. performance of God's Trying to Tell You Something is sold out.
That's the bad news. The good news is there's one last performance. Saturday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Wilshire Ebell Theater.
Get your tickets now
And be in the house.
see what everybody's talking about.
All remaining seats only $50.
But hurry before they sell out again.
Tickets on sale now at eventbrite.com and godstryingtotellyousomething.com.
It's a night of theater you'll never forget.
It's God's Trying to Tell You Something.
Be a part of the live studio audience.
He's trying to tell you something.
Don't miss it.
Moments like hearing my cat purr good morning mean a lot to me. But after being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, or MBC, which is breast cancer that is spread to other parts of the body, they mean even more. I take Ibrance, palbociclib.
Ibrance 125 milligram tablets with an aromatase inhibitor is for adults with HR-positive, HER2-negative MBC as the first hormonal-based therapy. Ask your doctor about Ibrance and visit Ibrance.com. Ibrance may cause low white blood cell counts that may lead to serious infections. Ibrance may cause severe inflammation of the lungs. Both of these can lead to death. Tell your doctor right away if you have new or worsening symptoms, including trouble breathing, shortness of breath, cough, or chest pain. Before taking Ibrance, tell your doctor if you have fever, chills, or other signs of infection, liver or kidney problems, are or plan to become pregnant, or are breastfeeding. Common side effects include low red blood cell and low platelet counts, infections, tiredness, nausea, sore mouth, abnormalities in liver blood tests, diarrhea, hair thinning or loss, vomiting, rash, and loss of appetite.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs. But it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, can potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed with our guest in this hour, Alyssa Court, author of the book Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. Let's start with some basics, Alyssa. How did this notion, I don't want to call it a promise, maybe it is a promise, you tell me, but this notion that that your responsibility is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I might add, whether you have boots or not, that's your responsibility. It has become, to my mind, a foundational myth in this experiment in democracy. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, we should probably go back to the beginning of the word bootstrap.
Mm-hmm.
Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps was a joke initially. It was coined in the 19th century to describe somebody trying to do something really foolish, like trying to almost jump over themselves on their skis or, doing a somersault. You'd have to be Simone Biles to really pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So it became something incredibly serious, something that people took as writ over decades. And it became this thing that was like, you need to be able to, function on your own steam and forget family, government, forget the privilege of race, class, gender, right? None of that's important. It's all you. And that's what pulling yourself up by your bootstraps means. I mean, I'm not the only one who's critiqued it. I mean, Martin Luther King did. So has AOC. But, these words are really meaningful. The fact that this is what kids are told this in Ohio public school. Oh, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, And it's something that it's a way that people now punish themselves and judge others. You haven't managed to do that, thinking that about their neighbors.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing for someone or persons or for a system, for that matter, to advance that notion of brittle self-sufficiency, individual determination, personal accomplishment. It's one thing for that to be pushed in our direction. It's another thing, it seems to me, Alyssa, for so many fellow citizens to have bought into that narrative. What do you make of that reality?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is fear-based. And, for instance, with like the MAGA types, a lot of those people are pretty middle class. I mean, I think the average earnings was like $71,000 a year for people who are supporting Trump. Mm-hmm. These are not economically struggling people, but they might think, oh, I'm going to lose everything, right? So they have this kind of loss aversion, this fear of loss. And so then they start pointing fingers at people who they see as having not worked as hard and all these terrible things. I mean, there was a study done showing that, a large number of Republicans think that people are poor because they haven't worked hard enough. Mm-hmm. And this ideology has just sunk into the bones of a lot of people. And so it's going to take counter myths like the ones I'm trying to spread to really change some of these. I call it a folk psychology. Mm-hmm. It's like a folk psychology.
Yep. What are some of those counter myths that you're trying to spread by your own admission?
Yeah, so some of the counter myths are, that it's really important, to have politicians who have, worked for a living, who ran an automobile shop, or, I'm thinking of Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who was just elected down in Florida to representatives who told people, I don't have enough money right now to rent an apartment in D.C. He told the media that and was mocked for it. But I thought that was a beautiful thing to be like, I am 26 years old. I don't come from wealth. I'm a very bright young man and a political hope, but, I need to stay on my friends' couches. These counter myths that you can be successful and still not wealthy and still, struggling and still able to identify with ordinary people's experience. And then some of the counter myths are spreading things like, mutual aid and cooperatives and unions. And I have a whole host of solutions that are actually part of America's history that we don't talk about that much. So that's, mutual aids were, Du Bois wrote about them. They were a really important part of 19th and early 20th century banking and farming and other, kind of food distribution. And, we don't talk about them so much. And they're the part of the American dream as well.
Yeah. Let me confess to you, Alyssa, that as I was going through your text, my mind kept going back to one central fact, at least as I see it. And that is, when you suggested earlier in this conversation that this notion of the American dream initially started out as an idea of our American dream, and somewhere along the way it morphed into this notion of my American dream. We went from our to my. And I'm trying to think how we could possibly in real time think that there is an our American dream. This is the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever, which I think is a beautiful thing on the one hand. On the other hand, our country has never been as politically divided, say nothing of income inequality and economic divisions. I'll get to that later. But we've never been politically as divided as we are right now. So I'm not even sure, your counter narratives respectfully notwithstanding, we could ever embrace the notion of our American dream. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's part of the problem. It's these terrible divisions. But I think they do start with this total contempt that we have for anyone's vulnerability, including our own. Mm-hmm. So that's even beneath people's values. I think this is this sort of fear of being vulnerable, dependent, anybody else being vulnerable and dependent.
That's a powerful phrase. It hit me when you said it, that we have a certain kind of contempt for vulnerability, Unpack that for me.
Well, yeah, so I talk about something in my book I call the art of dependence. Mm-hmm. And that's people who, all of us, like 1 in 4 of us are disabled, people who need little assistance, or they need a lot of assistance, economic, physical, emotional, what have you. And that there can be something very beautiful, and there's a craft and a skill and a kind of grace in being able to both give and receive other people's needs, right? And like to have that dependence recognized, and to recognize how we are dependent on things like infrastructure, our cities, our highways, our families, whatever, our schools. And that's part of the beginning of getting away from the contempt. To this idea of American independence is so deeply ingrained and toxic to some extent. Like we're taught as children that we have to do everything on our own, and that America is a country of rugged individualism. Mm-hmm. As we age, and I think that the contempt may have to start at kind of relearning ideas around what it means to take care of each other and to create things together.
Mm. I'm just trying to imagine how that would ever happen in this moment. Good luck with that, Alyssa. Good luck with that project.
Oh my God, Tavis, you're so funny.
No, I'm keeping it real. I can't see that happening, but let me keep hope alive, as Jesse Jackson would say. I'll keep hope alive on that one.
Okay, wait, but Tavis, wait.
Sure.
But it's happening in some communities.
That's
right?
true.
And
that is true.
The point is, in these communities, we need to feel pride in that,
mm-hmm.
pride in that. So. Yeah. Let's just forget about the rest of them.
No.
Let's talk about the people that we already know want to connect to each other and maybe feel like I've got to make it on my own. I've got to be a success. And that's true. We all have friends and family that are like this, right? And how they might feel differently about their own capacity to lean on each other or like be connected to people in their community and see that as an achievement rather than just, making $100,000,
Yeah. Let me do this now. This seems in some ways like I'm jumping ahead, but it's okay. I can keep time and space, as can you. But I say I feel like I'm jumping ahead. I feel like I need to ask right now, given what you've just said, about the fight back. And again, we could do that later in the hour. But talk to me about the fight back. It is not as if that these things are foregone, these realities that you're talking about in this text, liberating ourselves from the American dream. It's not as if these things have to be a foregone conclusion. There is some fight back. So I take your point that there are people pushing back against these. What have you learned about the fight back against this notion that we can only do it by ourselves, and if you don't do it as an individual, then something's wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to so many people. I mean, I'm thinking of Dr. Armin Henderson, who during the pandemic, he gave COVID tests to unhoused people in Miami, and he was a doctor during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this for free. He had his kits donated by a local pediatrician, and he spent 20 hours a week doing this, and it was treacherous back then, right? Nobody was vaccinated, and he was going on the street and doing this. And that was part of how, he felt he was making a difference and, part of a kind of volunteer culture. And, I'm not saying that this is the answer, though, I have to say, Tavis, because volunteerism, I call it the dystopian social safety net. Even Armin Henderson said, this is sad that I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be this person. I want our government to have provided this, or I want, there to be massive philanthropy dollars heading into Miami to pay for this, not him doing this on his own after work. So I think, but that was beautiful. There was a whole culture of volunteers, during the pandemic doing this kind of work. There's something called participatory budgeting, where local citizens in like hundreds of cities around the country get to be part of their local budget making bodies, with local government deciding where their parks go, or if there should be new bathrooms in the schools, right? Reallocating money away from the police sometimes and towards these things. I talked to a lot of people at mutual aids, which people, maybe listeners know this from the pandemic. They popped up during the pandemic and they helped, elderly people, members of the community delivered food and medicine for free to members of their community. And there were like 1,000 or more of them around the country. So these are just a few of the ones that I found and encountered.
I was talking to a young lady who works in this building at this station. Her name is Charlotte. I was talking to her the other day in the hallway, and she was telling me that she has for quite some time now distributed food for free every Friday. She has a Friday food giveaway, and she was telling me how the lines have grown longer and longer over the last year or so. Once the government stopped those checks, the lines for people getting food every Friday in her food line has grown longer. And I read other articles suggesting that other charities are experiencing the same reality. Since you mentioned volunteerism, my mind went immediately to that story and that conversation with Charlotte about this notion, as I see it, of charity versus justice. When you talk about the American dream, one has to, it seems to me, talk about the distinction between charity and justice. And we're a country that loves charity. We'll talk about volunteering and all the things connected to it, but that's a far different thing than justice when it comes to the American dream, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Clara Barton, right? She created the American Red Cross, and she kind of put in play this idea that a hand up, not a hand out, right? That there was a distinction. But to me, okay, fine. It was wonderful that she created the American Red Cross, but why not a handout if somebody actually needs something, right? So I think there's again, this is part of the contempt for vulnerability and dependence that, George Bush can talk about 1,000 points of light, but if some of those points of light were coming from the federal government, he wouldn't be so happy about it,
No, I take your point.
Yeah. So, but, and I also looked at some of the countries where there's a lot of volunteerism, New Zealand, Netherlands, and they also had the strongest government-supported social safety net. So this whole idea that, like we have in America, that you have to either be a volunteer culture or you have to be this culture of, the big nanny state is just not true.
No, I take your point. It can be not either or, but both and. We'll talk about that more when we come forward after news, traffic, and sports. And I want to get Alyssa Court's take on this notion of American exceptionalism that I raised earlier that we continue to advance in this country, never mind what the data suggests. What about American exceptionalism as she sees it? She mentioned unfettered markets earlier, and I want to get her take on what role these unfettered markets have played in the downgrading, if you will, of the American dream. Alyssa Court is our guest. Her book is called Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. She's on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Former President Trump's attorney is arguing against Trump having to attend next week's rape and defamation trial involving E. Jean Carroll. In a letter to the judge Wednesday, Joseph Tacopino said his client wishes to appear at the New York trial, but his attendance shouldn't be necessary. He claims Trump being there would be a burden on the city and court, adding there's concern of logistical and financial burdens. In Kansas City, the elderly white man who allegedly shot a black teen who rang the wrong doorbell in Missouri is pleading not guilty to charges. 84-year-old Andrew Lester made his first court appearance Wednesday. If convicted of first-degree assault, Lester could face up to life in prison. He was released on a $200,000 bond. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Singular work in West LA. That's an unplanned lane closure or ramp closure of 30 minutes or longer. It's R10 eastbound at the 405. Two right lanes are blocked coming away from 4th, the busy drive. Mid-City, Santa Monica Freeway 10 west at Washington. Crash reported here with a slow commute from Elise, Vermont. Willowbrook, the 105 east, approaching Wilmington Avenue. Carpooling with a collision, slow and go from Central. And Baldwin Park, somebody broke it down on the 10 west around Baldwin Park Boulevard, trying to clear them to the right side. We're busy from Vincent Glendora.
If your company needs to spring into efficient hiring, then check out Indeed. Their powerful hiring platform makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers missed a great opportunity last night to take advantage of Ja Morant's absence. Morant's hand injury kept him on the sidelines, but his Memphis teammates responded. Memphis wins by 10 to even the best-of-7 series at 1-1. 6 Memphis players scored in double figures. Xavier Tillman had 22. The series comes to L.A. for the next 2 games. Game 3 is Saturday night. The Clippers are back in action tonight at home for Game 3 of their first-round series with Phoenix. The series is tied at 1-1. Kawhi Leonard has stepped up big time in Paul George's absence. Leonard is averaging 34 points in the first 2 games. Tip-off time tonight is 7:30. Tiger Woods might miss the rest of the 2023 season after having surgery on his right ankle Wednesday. The ankle has bothered Tiger since his car accident near LA in February of 2021. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
There are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Everybody with us. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
I won't thank you.
KBLA Talk 1580 would like to thank all of the businesses that tune into KBLA at work. We celebrate you, your calls to the station, and your overall support. To show our appreciation, we would like to treat your office to a lunch for 10, brought to you by the Original Taco Pete's. Open the KBLA Talk 1580 app or log on to KBLA1580.com to submit your office to be selected for our Office of the Week. We know you're just like our staff, putting in many hard, smart working hours per week. We just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. You and your staff deserve lunch on us. Enter your office to win lunch for 10 and be highlighted on KBLA Talk 1580 as our Office of the Week. Open the KBLA app or log on to KBLA 1580 to enter your office today to become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week, sponsored by the Original Taco Pete's, a black-owned restaurant. Become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action. Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis, Smiley. Our guest of this hour is Alyssa Court. You are listening to KBLA Talk 1580, and we're glad about it. Her book, Alyssa's book that is called Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. In case you've just tuned in, we interrogated that word from earlier in this conversation, liberating ourselves from the American Dream. And we've established in this conversation already that the American Dream started out as our American Dream. Now it is my American Dream, and we're sort of pushing back on this notion that everything is about individual determination. Everything is about brutal self-sufficiency. Everything is about personal accomplishment. And if you can't pull it off by yourself, then we all look at you and say there must be something wrong with you. Alyssa has unpacked in this hour already what she calls contempt for vulnerability. It's hard to argue with that there is in this country, sadly, a contempt for people's vulnerability. Just a quicker way to catch you up in case you've just tuned into this conversation, again, with Alyssa about her new book. It's called Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. This notion of American exceptionalism that I raised earlier in this conversation, Alyssa, what is your critique of it in real time?
You mean that we are in some ways a superior country for people? Yep. Well, I mean, you just have to look at the numbers to see that this is not the case. You know, we have Americans who, CEOs making $211 million during the pandemic, and meanwhile, worker pay over the past 40 years has fallen by nearly 3 percentage points of gross domestic product. You know, so that's like around $4,000 a year per employed worker. They're earning less. And so, we don't support people. And we also, honestly, the richest Americans were usually born on at least second base, usually third base. You know, there's a group that found in 2012 that over 60% of Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans were already well off when they began their careers. And so I think this idea that anybody can make it is just not true, and that the kind of support this country is giving its ordinary people, its regular working people, is just not enough. And that to me is what makes this country not a superior country in the least. You know, it's like this is not a great place for a lot of people to live.
Yeah. One of the things, excuse me, with regard to American exceptionalism, one of the things that I've found myself pushing back against, Alyssa, time and time again over the years, is this notion that X, Y, and Z is possible only in America. You hear that line all the time. Only in America could one do X. Only in America could one do Y. Only in America is this possible. And sadly, many of my black brothers and sisters got into using that line and advancing it around the election of Barack Obama. That only in America was this story possible. Indeed, Obama first put that notion out when he gave the big speech that put him on the national radar at the Democratic convention in Boston, where John Kerry was nominated. Obama advances this notion of only in America is my story possible. Well, respectfully, that's really not just true. It's not true. And then when he got elected, a whole bunch of black folks started saying only in America could this be possible. Well, the reality is that just because Barack Obama got elected president does not mean that your black behind can do anything in America. It doesn't mean that. Barack Obama was exceptional in a variety of ways. There were a number of things that allowed him to be elected. We're glad about it. He got 2 terms out of it. Good for him, good for the country, good for history. But at the end of the day, his mere election to the presidency does not mean that you can do anything in America. I'm raising this now because it seems to me to connect to the American dream that many people have, that the American dreams that if you the American dream suggests that if you work hard, you do this, you do that, you play by the rules, that anything is possible in America, and there is no other place like this on the globe. Your notion about that frame, that certain things are possible only in America.
Yeah, so, I mean, part of American exceptionalism is that it's a distinctive country, which that's clearly true. But yeah, the economic part, if we look at the mobility numbers, I mean, in the 1940s, someone born in the 1940s had like a 92% chance of equaling or exceeding their parents in terms of earning and other, measures. And then someone born in the 80s had a 50% chance. So, mobility has just gone down. So I think some of this is like this country, and this is why we have all this nostalgia and these people, wanting to return to the past, although we know how racist and sexist the past was, right? But there were things, there was greater mobility, right? And it was probably for some people, not all of us, right? But there's not that much mobility at this point, and I think of what Tressie McMillan Cotton said, which was trickle-down economics wasn't the best experience for people like me. And trickle-down economics has been, one of the ruling features of our economy, starting in the Reagan era.
Yeah. You raised the issue earlier of these unfettered markets. Indeed, they are. What's your critique of our unfettered markets vis-a-vis the American dream?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that there's very little way, as I was saying, about all the people in the Fortune 400 list that were born, very well off to begin with, 60% of them born well off, that it just is not a country that anymore in which you can start with very little and rise to the top of the ranks. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but I think knowing that, yes, we can start pushing for, more expansive educational possibilities and the things that might make that possible for people who didn't start with wealth. But we also can start forgiving ourselves when we don't do as well as we would like economically, because we need to realize that it is kind of poised against us, these systems, and poised against most of us.
Yep. You mentioned earlier, Alyssa, the drama that unfolded, again, vis-a-vis the American dream during the Reagan era. My mind went back when you said that almost immediately to the film Wall Street, starring one Michael Douglas, who, as you'll recall, played the character Gordon Gekko. And the line that became famous out of that movie from Gordon Gekko is that greed is good. Greed is good. To what extent has greed impacted, hollowed out, if you will, the American dream as we know it?
I think a lot. I mean, I think, we have people, we have the Elon Musks of this world. First of all, this is another thing. A lot of them claim to be self-made, getting back to my bootstrapped idea. They claim to have pulled themselves up from their bootstraps. Again, they came from relative or extreme wealth. And then they're now, trying to kind of torture the rest of us with their platforms. And we have Trump, who also pretends to be self-made, astonishingly, and fools the voters who believe he's self-made. This was a study that was done that many of the voters for Trump believed he was self-made. And I think this is where greed and sort of this claim of being self-actualized really is a specter that we have to try to puncture in this country. And we have I have these quotes from these guys. They're so greedy. They're like, I look. Somebody from Kinko said, I want to be looking down on space and thinking that could be in my, Earth could be in my portfolio. These kind of statements that these folks make. And then, as I said, the amount they made during the pandemic when people were struggling and, in such bad shape. I mean, we need to look at these disparities. I talk about, I also talk about, you're asking for collective solutions. movements where people are thinking differently about their wealth, like actual rich people who want their taxes to be more fair and policies to be more fair, even if it hurts them. And that, to me, is another new development that's more collective and community-oriented that we should be applauding. I call them the transparent rich or class traders. One of them posted their tax returns, they're very wealthy, to show how they benefited from, tax policy and loopholes and all that kind of stuff, And I think we need more of that also from the very rich in this country to just show income inequality.
Yep. It is clear that this redefining, if you will, of the American dream from our to my has steered us away, as you would say, from these robust social programs that could address the root causes of our problems. When we come forward, I want to ask whether or not it is possible to make a U-turn in that regard. We've been steered in one direction, but can we make a U-turn? We'll get an answer to that question and a great deal more when we come forward with the author of Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. Her name is Alyssa Quart, and she's on KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Black Chamber of Commerce is helping to expand broadband access. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by Lendistry. Story courtesy of CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. The California Black Chamber of Commerce is joining hands with California state government to help narrow its digital divide by helping push the state's Middle Mile Broadband Initiative through the Broadband Technology Small Business Initiative. It connects CBCC's statewide membership of 5,500 plus small African American business firms and non-Black entities to the benefits of broadband technology. 2020 Internet Access records that 15% of Black Californians had zero internet access. And another program known as the Affordable Connectivity Program makes qualifying households eligible for $30 a month toward internet service. Visit fcc.gov/ACP for more.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited Black newspaper in the state of California with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
Personal Law Office is your go-to attorney for criminal cases. We will work with you at every step to ensure you are fully informed and your rights are protected. Call me at 424-261-2075 if you're facing any criminal offenses.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
So it's clear, Alyssa, in your book, you make it clear, I should put it that way, what has happened to the American dream as we have known it. As I said earlier, we've been directed in a particular way. We've steered ourselves away from these social programs that could address the root causes of what we face. And yet, I'm curious as to whether or not you think the damage is irreparable or it's possible to make a U-turn.
Well, I think, again, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of different things, like from these mutual aids I wrote about, told you about, to different kinds of social programs, right? We had, eviction moratorium. We had SNAP and Medicaid, compulsive, check-ins to see if people were still, quote-unquote, worthy of SNAP or Medicaid. There were a lot fewer of them, right? Because we didn't have the people weren't in their offices, No one wanted to go indoors, right, with each other. So people just got to stay on the rolls, and they weren't pushed off of the rolls of welfare programs. And like, this is the kind of stuff we could learn from, and we just have to stick with it. And I think there's been a lot of really great, there's the American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit. We just have to stay the course with that. And then I think, on a personal level, we have to start thinking less about kind of gratitude and this kind of thing, mindfulness, and think more about how the people who've helped us in our life and giving them credit, from your babysitter to, your favorite teacher to your employees, right? So this is like a mindset shift, getting out of the grind set and into this more kind of attribution, this more attributive mindset where you start thinking of other people as making you who you are.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I always push back after years, and always will push back on this notion that you raised earlier. People who brand themselves as being self-made. Ain't nobody self-made. First of all, you didn't birth yourself. You didn't burp yourself. You didn't bathe yourself. You didn't teach yourself. You didn't feed yourself. I mean, none of us are self-made. Every one of us, we are who we are, as I often say, because somebody loved us. Even Elon Musk. You are who you are because somebody loved you. Ain't nobody really self-made, and I hate that term. I digress on that point.
No. You know what I like to say, Tavis? If you think you're self-made, call your mother.
There you go. Point well taken. Point well taken. Speaking of mothers, to what extent is the way that we have, again, hollowed out this notion of the American dream burdening generations to come?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, so I talk about what, needing this parents' revolution, mother's revolution. And, part of this is that we don't really have the daycare system. We have a daycare non-system. And, I talked to people during the height of COVID who were like having their 14-year-old take care of their younger children in their house during remote school while they were working multiple jobs because they made, $9.25 an hour. And I think, we need to look at this. Why does America give so little of its GDP to childcare? And how can we make greater access for childcare? And could we have, people talk about UBI, right? Andrew Yang and all that, but could we have a UBI that's just for mothers of young children, right? So they can just pay for daycare. Because that's going to really burden, that burdens our economy to have workers who are unable to work and, raising kids who didn't have enough care.
Yeah. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Alyssa Court talking about her new book, Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. She's used this phrase a few times, which I love, but I want to interrogate it. This notion of a grind set. It's one thing to have a mindset. These days, we all have a grind set, and I want to talk about that in our remaining moments with Alyssa when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I was able to speak with one of the panelists, the owner of Kids Love. Take a listen.
So Kids Love, KIDSLUV, is a first-to-market zero-sugar, vitamin-enhanced functional beverage for kids.
So the zero sugar is really important because if not, the sugar gets on the teeth, it can cause cavities. So as a mom, I love this vitamins and hydration in one. Tell us what's happening here with Chase Bank today.
So I would say, I think what Chase is trying to do is create a community actually for entrepreneurs, a place where people can go. They have the space to do it. It's a beautiful space. And to be able to have these conversations. There are so many benefits to being a women-owned and certified business from a standpoint of getting into stores, not paying the slotting fees of what it takes to be in stores. So I think Chase is trying to bring awareness to a lot of the things that people just don't know about that not only the bank can help, but outside of the bank, their relationships can help create.
That's beautiful. And I know, this is how we build equity in communities of color, is kind of spreading that information and that knowledge. So thank you for being here today and doing your part and letting these women know that it is possible.
For KBLA 1580, I'm Maisha Cairo in the community with Chase.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to Alyssa Court in the 4 minutes that we have left, discussing her book, Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. You've talked in this conversation, Alyssa, which I'm grateful for, a few times about the notion of grind set. Great phrase, love the word. And yet, in times like these, I'm not sure what the alternative is to having a grind set. If you don't grind it out these days, I mean, what's the alternative?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, this is where the radical self-help part comes in, that, if you're going to be one of the, say, 30% of Americans who do something else for pay in addition to their full-time job, that was according to one survey, or, you're going to be told that this is a side hustle and, that it's cheerful and fun, and then sort of they call it hustle porn, right? And it just knowing that it's difficult and sometimes backbreaking to have multiple jobs can be helpful. So you're not like, why am I so tired by this? I'm thinking of this NFL coach. This was an insane quote. I said that doing your job right means waking up at 3 a.m. with a knot in your stomach, a rash on your skin, losing sleep, and losing touch with your wife and kids. This is the mentality that we're being preached about a lot, this grind set thing, where the Lyft driver, I don't know if you remember the story, who continued to pick up riders after she herself went into labor. These are really extreme. And yeah, we may have to work multiple jobs because, as we've been going over, we're not given adequate social support in this country, and people are being paid less than $15 an hour. And even if you're making $15 an hour, this is not enough. But it's at least good for us to know that it's not enough, and for us to know that we ourselves have not done something wrong.
Yeah. So I think this is the exit question, I think. What is the most dangerous part of this myth that we have bought into regarding this obsession with self-reliance?
I mean, I think the most dangerous part is what it does to communities and how corrosive it is, and also what it does, as you were saying, how it divides people. It makes, a lot of Republican identified people blame those who need social aid. And I think we need to look at what that has to do with people's voting patterns, honestly, Yeah.
This is disconnected, but I'll do a not so gentle pivot. You'll take my point. You said voting habits. I think that one of the great things, one of the ills facing our society long term, speaking of dangerous things, is this notion of gerrymandering. I think it's hard to see how we fix our democracy, Alyssa, if we don't do something about the issue of gerrymandering. That has a great deal to do, I think, with putting the American dream where it ought to be.
Absolutely, and also not just saying this is the way things are. I think what part of the toxin is, if you're like, America's so great, and you buy into this, and you aren't critically minded about what actually is there and what's actually being done in terms of, how voting is being districted, like you're pointing out, then again, you're blindsided, and you don't understand why your needs are not being met by your political leaders,
Yep. There's a lot in this book. I highly recommend it. It's called Bootstrapped, Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream. It is written by Alyssa Court, who I've been honored to have had on for this hour on KBLA Talk 1580. Alyssa, thanks for the book. Thanks for your work. Thanks for your witness. Just delighted to have a chance to talk to you for this hour. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you too. I really appreciate you too, Tavis. Seriously.
Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. There's hour one, just like that. When we come forward in hour two, we will talk sports. There's a lot to talk about. Mr. Hamlin says he's making a comeback to the NFL after we all watched him almost die, as it were, on the field in that game between the Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals, that is, if I can say it. Would you go back if that had been you on the field and the whole world is watching you? Would you, after being raised from the dead, as it were, go back and do this all over again? I don't know. We'll talk about it with our guest, Ray Richardson and Neil Scarborough, the host of Out of Bounds here on the weekends, our sports show. They'll be live in studio in a moment on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.